Ahoy, sexy! You are listening to the Greta-thon on Coffee Nick's Movie Picks, a limited film review series celebrating and honoring the portfolio of Greta Gerwig thus far over a lovely cup of coffee, of course. My name is Nick Delaney, and I'm your show host, cold brew freak, black and white movie fan, and the guy who is undateable. Oh. Oh. Anyways, in our first official episode of the Greta-thon, we will be reviewing and discussing Frances Ha, the 2012 film directed by Noah Baumbach and starring Greta Gerwig. We'll be pairing this black and white film with a black cup of the Nomad, a blend by Canvas Coffee Roasters. Please take a seat, stay a while, and let's talk traveling to Paris just to watch Puss in Boots over some coffee. Capiche? But first, and always but first, please be sure to follow at Coffee Nick's Movie Picks on Instagram and TikTok. There you can stay up to date on new releases, which there will be plenty this month, see coffee pictures that go along with each episode, get some quick movie thoughts from yours truly, and submit Dear Coffee Nick letters. Again, that's at Coffee Nick's Movie Picks on Instagram and TikTok. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Greta-thon. Yet again, I'm so excited and so thrilled to be hosting this series and just to be creating this and celebrating Gerwig right now. I have so much to say about the Greta-thon. Obviously, this is a 9-part series, but if you want to hear me talk more about the Greta-thon, like what is this, why am I doing it, and what's it going to look like, I have an introduction/trailer episode that is out now. It's about 30 minutes long, so go listen to that if you want to be filled in on like, who is Greta Gerwig? What movies has she released? What is this series going to look like? And why am I the person to be talking about Greta Gerwig? I answer all of those questions there, and I will definitely touch on them again as this series progresses. All right, how are we doing? How are we doing? I have a lot to say. So first of all, and most importantly, there's like a lot of most importantly. It's like, I don't even know which one is most important. But I think I feel the need to address right now that I'm recording this in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Yeah, I'm like looking, I can look to my left and there is the ocean speeding by. Has a podcast ever been recorded on the ocean? Has it? Has a movie coffee review podcast about Greta Gerwig specifically ever been recorded on a boat on the Atlantic Ocean is what I would like to know. Can someone fact check me? And if I'm the first person, can we call up Guinness Book of World Records? Is that a thing? For context, yes, hi. I am on vacation right now. I am on a cruise. But I am behind on recording this series. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to feel so much better if I work on this podcast throughout my vacation. But also I'm like, well, I have to do a lot of recording. How am I going to do it on vacation? And I'm like, duh, I'm going to pack super light and bring my microphone with me. Here I am. Recording this on a boat. So yeah, it's the first day. We're setting sail, having a lovely time. We're on the Icon of the Seas, which is the largest cruise boat in the world. This thing is like scary how big it is. Like, oh my gosh, but it is gorgeous. I'm having a lovely time so far. Can't complain. Very, very grateful to be here. Kind of insane that I'm recording a podcast on a boat. This is definitely a podcaster landmark moment for me. So yeah, if you are a podcaster and you've recorded at sea before, I'd love to know your thoughts. But I listened back to this audio and oh my God, like this audio in this stateroom, this is crisp. This is really great. So honestly, maybe it's a good thing. Like I'm just going to record all my episodes here. Okay. Other big news, which is just going hand in hand with everything, is that I'm moving. I am moving to DC. I signed a lease in DC. I'm going to be living in the Northeast area. I signed the lease, maybe 5 days ago, less than a week ago for sure. And usually that means like, oh, I have a month to plan and everything. No, I get my keys the day that the Greta-thon releases. So I get my keys the day the Greta-thon releases, and I'm just going to be continually moving in for like a week and then officially be living in my new apartment that next weekend. So, right in the middle of this Greta-thon starting, which is another reason why I was like, I just simply have to bring my microphone on the trip because, once I get back from the trip, I will have absolutely no time to work on this. But the place is lovely. I am so excited to be moving to the city. I've been having a lovely time working in DC for the past few months, so I'm excited to, move other pieces of my life to DC as well. I've really fallen in love with the city, and people in DC are really so friendly. Like, it's so easy to talk to a lot of people up there. And it just has such a fun atmosphere. And people also, they work hard and they play hard. So yeah, a lot is happening for me. Also, oh my gosh, this was like a selling factor on my new apartment. I didn't even need to see the apartment. So I walked off the metro. There is an Alamo Theater 15 minutes from my apartment. Walking. 15 minutes walking. I was like, so show me that lease now. Like, I'm signing that. Damn. Give me that. Yes, so a lot is going on. Is this a bad time to be starting this series? Who knows? But like, I don't know. I set this for myself. I'm doing it. Whether or not like all these different circumstances are going out of control, it's fine. It's fine. We're doing it. In other news, this is a message to all of my Coffee Nick movie picks audience members. It's about that time to go to vote.gov and make sure you are registered to vote. If you are not registered to vote, you better register. It is about that time. It's already late. You need to start educating yourself about these candidates. You need to make a well-informed decision. I'm very serious about voting. It is your duty as a member of this community or this country to vote. It is a democracy. So in order for a democracy to work, that means everyone's voice needs to be heard. So please be a good community member, be a good member of this democracy, make your voice heard. Okay. That's all I had to say. I'm sorry, I talked about myself a lot today, but I just had so much to update on. But let's just get into the Now Brewing. The Now Brewing is a luxury coffee discussion and review segment. Now Brewing in today's episode is the Nomad Blend by Canvas Coffee Roasters. So I want to talk a bit about Canvas Coffee Roasters because they have quite an interesting story. They started out as a coffee shop and now they are a digital coffee vendor. And I'm just reading this from their website because they wrote it so well. So quote, in 2019, we made it our mission to provide productivity and life to our community through means of great coffee at our coffee house. We never want to isolate anyone who tastes our coffee. Therefore, we view it simply as super tasty coffee, a new-ish representation for those who don't realize that coffee doesn't need to be jazzed up with cream, sugar, and other additives. We keep it simple and let the bean speak for itself. End quote. So really, they started out as, your average coffee shop. They, right before COVID, ventured into coffee roasting, and that ultimately allowed them to survive throughout the pandemic. And here is another excerpt from their website. Quote, pivoting to mainly an online presence, we value community, and great coffee is meant to be shared. For that, our call to action is this. If you enjoy our coffee, buy coffee with the intention to also share it. Whether this entails inviting a friend over for a cup of coffee or gifting a bag of one of our blends or single origins, we want everyone to enjoy Canvas. At Canvas Coffee Roasters, we set our sights into the beyond. The infinite is our canvas, and we want you to be a part of it. We aren't just selling a product, rather a lifestyle that you can incorporate in your daily ritual. We are pushing the boundary of the fundamental idea of coffee. In the past, you needed a coffee house to fuel your productive energy. We are encouraging you to sit back and drink coffee whenever. Enjoy good coffee at home, at work, or on an adventure. Cheers. End quote. Sorry, I know I read a lot from them, but I just really liked everything that they had to say about just their journey and coffee as a whole. When it comes to coffee, what Canvas what I just said, what Canvas just said, is very representative of how I feel about coffee, and by extension, how this show feels about coffee. I view coffee as something that is meant to push you further, to unite you with others, and ultimately something that's meant to be shared. That is something I set out to do with this show, to share coffee with you all. Also, I think all the same could be said about movies. So, what I have to say is thank you, Canvas Coffee Roasters, for this lovely writing. Everything I just said is exactly why I selected this coffee to be the first feature of the Greta-thon. I want it to be part of this celebration of Gerwig because I think it really fits in well here. About the coffee itself, though, I know I haven't even talked about the coffee yet. This is a packaged coffee created and roasted by Canvas called The Nomad. I selected this to be featured on this episode particularly because our now showing review today is Frances Ha, and that is very much the coming of age story of a nomad in a way. And here's what Canvas has to say about the blend. Quote, our end goal for this blend was to create a coffee that does well in both hot and cold brewing methods. We knew that a balance of flavors will maximize the sensory experience for both a hot coffee and a cold brew. For that, we sourced origins with contrasting profiles. Latin American coffees tend to elicit deep cocoa and nutty flavor profiles, whereas African coffees tend to present fruitier aspects. We were confident that a natural coffee would bring out the fruitiness that is enjoyable as a cold brew, and we finally came across the Ethiopia Rafisa. Likewise, we balanced these bright, fruity aspects with a well-rounded, chocolate-forward Latin American bean, arriving at the Peru Lima. These two beans are a 50-50 or 1-1 blend, resulting in a balanced, tasty coffee. The Nomad is our bestseller and a stellar blend that excels in all brewing methods. We taste semi-sweet chocolate, light tropical fruit, and orange zest. End quote. Once again, Canvas, the description does my job for me. It is beautifully written. What else do I even have to say about this coffee? They basically just said it all. I completely agree with what they said, that this blend is great using any method. So far, I've brewed it using my pour-over set and a French press. I'm wanting to try making cold brew with it too because that sounds divine, but I don't have a cold brew maker. So I think this is for anyone. In terms of notes, what's really coming through for me personally are the orange and lemon tones and a strong chocolate taste. What I usually fear with like a citrusy coffee is that it might be like a little too acidic, but this one is very well balanced. If you're looking to expand your horizons for an at-home coffee, or try just a unique tasting coffee in general, this is the one to start with. Also, the Nomad comes whole bean only, but please do not let that intimidate you. Stores like Target sell super cheap coffee grinders that are great to start with. Also, portafilters and sets are also sold at Target. So what I have to say is you got this. Please do not let the fact that this is only sold as a whole bean coffee intimidate you. It is super easy to get into brewing your own coffee at home. This is a great first step if you're looking to try at-home artisan coffee. With that said, I'm going to give the Nomad by Canvas Coffee Roasters the Nick pick. This is a uniquely delicious yet comforting blend of coffee that will be a staple for me from here on out. Also, this is available to purchase using the link in the show notes. And no, this is not sponsored. I just think this is a wonderful coffee that is great for anyone to try or start with, or even if you're a coffee snob, this is still wonderful. So please go buy it in the show notes. And thank you, Canvas Coffee Roasters, for being bold, for trying new things, and for being so dedicated to the coffee craft. All right, with that said, and now that we have our now brewing out of the way, it's time to get into the coffee thought. This is an outlet dedicated to voice my many incoherent thoughts over a lovely cup of coffee. So get your Nomad blend out, get that pour over set, filter, and coffee grinder that I told you to buy out, because we're getting into the coffee thought. Except I don't have coffee with me. I went up to one of the bars on the main deck, and yeah, I'm still on a boat. Crazy. And I got what is called a shandy, I think. And this is a Stella Artois beer with honey, I think, and lemon juice. Really strange blend here. I've never had like beer with other ingredients in it. I don't know if that's technically a cocktail or what. But this is yummy. Like a sweetened beer. This is really good. I don't know how to talk about beer like I know how to talk about coffee, so that's all I have to say. But if you're ever on Royal Caribbean's Icon of the Seas, go to that one bar. I don't even know what the name was, and get yourself a brandy or a shandy or a shanty. I don't know. Look, tell them Coffee Nick sent you, and they'll pour you something nice. Okay. In today's coffee thought, what we're talking about is the pumpkin spice epidemic that happens every year at differing times. It's been getting earlier and earlier every single year that this has been a thing. That's what I want to know. When did the pumpkin spice movement start? And I think that has to do with coffee. I think it started with coffee, a corporate coffee chain to be exact, which I do not want to name. And I think it just went from there. It became a limited edition thing that people went crazy for, which it makes sense. It's really great. And it just spread to everything. I think even there is pumpkin spice ramen or something crazy out now. That is just an example of how far this epidemic, this trend, this whatever you want to call it, has gone. So, like I said, it's been starting earlier and earlier every year. You see this at corporate coffee houses earlier and earlier every year. And everyone has their own version of it. There is pumpkin spice bread. There is pumpkin spice donuts, milk creamer. There is pumpkin spice dog treats, probably. There is pumpkin spice Fortnite, most likely. There's probably pumpkin spice vapes. There's maybe even pumpkin spice condoms. There is no limit to how far they are bringing pumpkin spice. There's no limit. It's everywhere. And every company, if they have a product, they take part in it. At this point, yeah. What are my thoughts? Is it too early for pumpkin spice? Because I went to the grocery store the other day to get my Greek yogurt because I eat Greek yogurt before work. It's light and it has protein. And they already had pumpkin spice Greek yogurt. And I need to mention that, this episode is released August 6th, maybe? And I recorded this weeks before. I saw this Greek yogurt maybe mid-July, pumpkin spice Greek yogurt. Now, what was that? Crazy. I mean, it is the dead of summer, and I saw it. So yeah, I put one in my cart, and I bought it, and I ate it, and it was delicious. Yeah. Here's what I think. And I've said this before, I think. Do not deprive me of a delicious flavor because it's supposed to be dependent on one time of year specifically. What if I want a peppermint mocha? What if I want a gingerbread latte? What if I want pumpkin spice, apple cider coffee? What if I want whatever? What if I want that at a different time of year? Yeah, because I've craved a little Christmas spirit, holiday cheer, holiday bliss. I've craved that in the dead of June. And pumpkin spice, shut up. Shut up. Pumpkin spice is not even pumpkin. It's a simulation. We had a class lecture about this in college. We took it to a whole nother level, of course, but pumpkin spice usually has no pumpkin in it. It is just the spice that they use in pumpkin pie. So like nutmeg, cinnamon, brown sugar, whatever else goes in there. And it makes you think of pumpkin pie and thus pumpkin. But it's just a blend of spices. Pumpkin spice, I can enjoy cinnamon and nutmeg blend all year round, you know? So that's what I think about pumpkin spice. I think it is never too early to start because you know why they're selling it so early? Because we're buying it so early. Yeah, someone out there wants it that early. So they're going to start selling it that early. It doesn't matter. That's just that's how capitalism works, right? Right? Yeah, if I'm going to enjoy it, I'm going to enjoy it. I'm not going to, hold off on, letting myself enjoy something until a specific time of year. But with that said, when the fall does come around, when the leaves change color and start falling from the tree and Halloween is upon us, I go even harder with pumpkin spice. Of course, I go even harder. It's pumpkin spice everything. And I throw in a little bit of apple cider everything too. I turn on the spooky movies. I turn on Over the Garden Wall. Great show that they're trying to erase from history. And by them, I mean Warner Brothers Discovery, the evil, evil, evil Warner Brothers Discovery, trying to wipe away Over the Garden Wall and many other amazing little creative projects like Infinity Train. Read up on it. Nope, I'll talk about it. I'll talk about it later. You don't have to read up on it. I will use any moment I can to talk about how evil Warner Brothers Discovery is. And I did see recently that they're in talks of separating Warner Brothers and Discovery. Do it. Do it. Do it, I dare you. No, really, do it. That would be for the best, I think, because let's bring back creativity at Warner Brothers. Let's do that. Also, while you're at it, release Batgirl. Release Batgirl. How about that? But yes, pumpkin spice, don't let people say you can't enjoy something because it's not the right time of year. If it brings you any sort of enjoyment, go for it. Why not? Eating pumpkin spice yogurt rather than blueberry yogurt or strawberry yogurt, that does not hurt anyone. If that brings you an extra level of enjoyment, go for it. And if we really are so serious about not having pumpkin spice until the fall, let's stop buying it. But I won't do that. I'm enjoying it now. If you won't buy it now, more for me, right? Anyways, that's what I have to say. So, what now? I am so glad you asked. So, now showing the Greta-thon, our feature ideological analysis and critical film review segment, honoring and celebrating the portfolio of Greta Gerwig, hosted by yours truly. Now showing in today's entry of the Greta-thon episode is Frances Ha. Frances Ha is a 2012 black and white film directed by Noah Baumbach, written by Baumbach and Greta Gerwig, and starring Greta Gerwig. The film follows Frances, a woman in her late 20s who lives with her best friend and entire world, Sophie, played by Mickey Sumner. After breaking up with her boyfriend in hopes of continuing to live with Sophie, Frances is crushed when Sophie reveals she'll be living with her boyfriend, leaving Frances friendless and homeless. Now, as always, I encourage you to watch this film, and even more with the Greta-thon, I encourage you to watch these films with me as I'm releasing the episodes. I think that Frances Ha is usually on Netflix, so you can find it there, or it's worth purchasing digitally on DVD. I think you'll love it, so you might as well just buy the whole thing. Now, to contextualize this film a bit, it is directed and co-written by Noah Baumbach and also co-written by Greta Gerwig. For those of you who do not know, the two are now married, but at the time that this film started production, it is suspected that they were only beginning to be romantic with one another. Noah first saw Greta when she starred in the 2007 film Hannah Takes the Stairs. This caused him to want to work with her in his 2010 film Greenberg, where Gerwig co-starred with Ben Stiller. Let's talk about that film. Greenberg. I hate it. I really do not like that film. And I'm not going to be reviewing that film. Any film where Ben Stiller is malicious and evil to Greta Gerwig, which it's just this film, yeah, no, that's a wrap. No one should be acting that way in front of Greta. But anyways, from there, Gerwig went on to write Frances Ha with Baumbach, and later Mistress America with Baumbach, which will get its own review later this month as well. After Mistress America, Gerwig then went on to officially direct her first solo debut film, Lady Bird. Their marriage is quite recent, actually, even though they've been together for over a decade. They got married in December 2023, and they have 2 boys together. In terms of this film, all you need to know is that this was happening at the very start of something. I don't know what it was exactly. It might have just been like talking, it might have been romantic, who knows, but it was happening at the start of something between Baumbach and Gerwig. That is one aspect of Gerwig that I wanted to share with you all. Her relationship with Baumbach. He is known for writing and directing Marriage Story, along with several other really critically acclaimed films. Personally, I tend to like Gerwig's films more. Maybe one day I'll review more of Baumbach's stuff. But yeah, I hope that contextualizes this film better. So, speaking of that, the film, I think that the best way to start talking about this film is to talk about the actual start of the film. So, it opens with Frances playing in the park with her friend, Sophie, played by Mickey Sumner, but they're both in their late 20s. So, this is basically a montage of Frances and Sophie running and dancing through the streets of New York, and it's almost like a romantic montage of their friendship together. The actual romances that these characters have with men are painted as secondary to this friendship between Frances and Sophie. And early on, Frances makes it very clear that her world revolves around Sophie, and she doesn't want that to change at all. Sophie, on the other hand, feels the pressures that society places on her as an adult of her age to pursue romantic relationships over her friendships. With this setting in place, with how these characters feel about each other, Frances breaks up with her boyfriend to live with Sophie, while Sophie leaves Frances to live with her boyfriend. They basically just do the opposite of each other, and it is a tragic misunderstanding and also the inciting incident of this film. I think that this is one of my favorite inciting incidents of any film. It could not be any more perfect or unique for this story and these characters. It just sets the stage for what this story is about to communicate to its audiences perfectly. The one thing I always emphasize when I talk about this film is how immediately we are introduced to Frances as a character who is very visibly out of place from societal norms for someone of her age and gender. For example, she is a fully grown adult playing in the park with her friend. They are running around, they're dancing, peeing on subway tracks, play fighting. It's just, if you saw this when you were going to the park, you'd be like, what the hell are they doing? Just someone who is very out of place because, no one that age really acts that way. In her late 20s, Frances, along with all of these other characters, are expected by society to have a stable office job, to act cordially and calmly, and especially as a woman in Frances's case, have a romantic relationship in her life, which is treated as a priority. Frances is doing none of these things. Instead, like I said, she's running through the streets of New York, play fighting with her friend in the park, dancing on the sidewalk, and she has little interest in her romantic life. One of my favorite scenes of this movie is when Frances breaks up with her boyfriend because she says no to moving in with him. And you can just tell Frances feels little emotion about what is happening while the boyfriend is like being torn apart. Francis is just kind of like, okay, well, we have to break up. And it's during this serious conversation, Sophie calls her on the phone and Francis picks up and does like the most obnoxious phone answering ever. And she's like, hey, what's going on, girl? Like just something ridiculous. And it always makes me laugh when I watch this movie. So yeah, she really does not care about her romantic relationship, at least when it comes to her friendship with Sophie. So there could be a lot of reasons as to why Frances is like this as a character and why she's written like this. Ultimately, though, it's in service of this story that they're trying to tell. But to me, I feel like it speaks to a message on a larger scale. This will be something recurring throughout this series, but by being depicted as out of place from societal norms, Frances operates outside of society on her own terms. But her character's rejection of societal norms also makes her a bit of a trailblazer. Yeah, she doesn't have an office job, and yeah, she prioritizes her best friend over her boyfriend. But so what? She is very different from what society deems as acceptable and appropriate, but she really doesn't give a fuck, and she's gonna do what she's gonna do. So she's rejecting these norms, which is a bit empowering. And this is the most recurring thing that I'm going to talk about in this series, so I can't wait to give more examples and to explain it further when the time comes. By doing this, it's commenting, critiquing, and questioning what we as viewers deem as societal norms. Are the norms that we adopt necessary? Are they fair? And how are they based on gender and age? Frances's out of placeness is even more emphasized by the other characters surrounding her in this film. Her best friend Sophie acts as a foil or narrative opposite of Frances. At the moment when Frances doubles down in her rejection of these norms, Sophie caves in. She begrudgingly moves in with her boyfriend, even though it suggested she would rather just live with Frances. Her and Frances are really the same, but the difference between them is what they choose in that inciting incident, that pivotal moment of the film. Later in the film, Frances lives with Rachel, played by Grace Gummer, who is, by the way, Meryl Streep's daughter. Rachel also is very opposite to Frances, and she serves as the stark contrast to what her friendship with Sophie once was. Rachel is the embodiment of someone who strives to attach themselves to these societal norms of gender and adulthood. We see this when Frances interacts with her the way she used to act with Sophie. In one particularly funny scene, Frances abruptly play fights with Rachel in the park, just like she used to do with Sophie, and Rachel, cowers away and is basically like, well, what the fuck are you doing? And at a dinner party scene, which I'll talk about more in a second, Rachel engages in very adult-like banter and pleasantries with everyone, whereas Frances is just talking out of her ass and saying nonsense that no one can really understand. So we have Sophie, who is just like Frances, but chose to follow the societal norms. We have Rachel, who embodies the societal norms. So who embodies the rejection of those norms? Lev and Benji. I believe Lev is played by Adam Driver, and Benji is the one played by Michael Zegan. The boys are particularly aimless in life, and they get away with doing pretty much whatever they want. They are both very uninspired artists who really just sit around all day and bring home girls at night, and Benji just sits and watches Kung Fu Panda or something. Yeah, they are kind of like the embodiment of not keeping up with what society expects of them, to have a career, to have stable relationships and everything. And they get away with it too because they're men. With that being said, I think that they serve an important role in pointing out how this film operates as a feminist text. Lev and Benji are not upheld to the same standards that, Frances, Rachel, and Sophie are. But, in the end, they eventually do shape up. So what do I think about all of these parallels and this commentary about societal norms? I love it. I think this is absolutely brilliant. I love when characters serve as parallels of one another because by having characters that are similar to each other but choose different paths, you sort of get a what if narrative. So, what if Frances did choose to shape up and be an adult earlier on in the film? Whereas, like, what if Frances was a man? Would she still be upheld to the same standards? I think this is a really great method of writing because it explores so many different avenues while still having the focus on one main character. Having characters that are parallels of one another really scratches an itch in my brain. Now, what does all of this mean in a historical context? Because there definitely is a historical context to this movie. So, when I was doing my research on Greta Gerwig, there was no research on Greta. I think that there definitely has been a lot more since I started the research because of Barbie and because she's become such a household name. But when I first started researching her, there were really two articles out about her. One was about Frances Ha, and that one was more about the technical aspects of that film alone and also Greta Gerwig's performance in it. And the other article that was published about Greta Gerwig was a celebrity study. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit. This article is titled Millennial Disentitlement, and it's written by Ryan Dorian. Basically, in this article, Dorian argues that millennials are unentitled to the grace of navigating life in their 20s because they grew up in an America that was going through a recession. Basically, this group of millennials that graduated college right when the recession was started were either forced to grow up very quickly and be extreme go-getters and very career-driven, or they were just left absolutely aimless because it was impossible to really succeed during this time in America. In their research, Dorian uses Gerwig's early films to explore these ideas about millennials. In a way, Frances Ha is a snapshot of this phenomenon. All of these characters here are millennials, and this is filmed in a post recession America. We have Rachel and Sophie, who are concerned with being those extreme go getters and very career driven and living up to those ideals of being an adult. And then we have Lev and Benji, who represent, the aimless millennials who kind of gave up. And I think that's very fair because during that time, it was very hard to find a job when you had little experience. But, Lev and Benji were also privileged because of the fact that they were men. And it was stated multiple times in the film that they come from wealth. So they can afford to just kind of lounge around and not do anything. Frances is out of place of all of this. She needs to be career driven. She needs to be making money because she does not have that privilege. But she isn't willing to accept help and to sort of lower her expectations or choose a different path or find something different. She's caught in between these two extremes. This article is also really helpful when we talk about Gerwig's mumblecore films, which we're going to talk a lot more about that in the Hannah Takes the Stairs and the Nights and Weekends episode, because all of those sort of deal with this millennial disentitlement that happened in America's Great Recession. Moving on from this, another thing that I love to note about this film is that Frances has everything she needs to succeed at the start of the film. Everything is handed to her, but she just doesn't know how to accept those things yet. She has ideas in her head of how she wants her life to be, and they're just not feasible. Really, the film isn't about her discovering the path ahead. It's more about her learning to be humble enough to accept a different path entirely. Dang. Dang! I wrote that. That was kind of poetic. Wow. But the movie brought me there, so it's the movie that's poetic, but I just found some good words to summarize it, huh? But talking a little bit more about this, at the start of the film, Frances doesn't have any money, but she gets a tax rebate in the mail, and she chooses to spend all of it on dinner with Lev. Also, Frances gets laid off from her dance company as a performer. And instead of performing in the dance, which would give her a lot of money, she's offered an office job. But she turns that down because she wants to be a dancer, not work in the dance company's office. Instead, Frances just accepts a bunch of things that she thinks will make her seem more like an adult, like taking a flight to Paris and doing nothing in Paris. This is a great narrative design, and I think the concept of having everything you need when you don't think you need it is the best part about this movie. Frances taking the trip to Paris definitely is the start of her spiraling out of control and realizing that she has an issue with accepting reality. And this all starts with the dinner party scene, which I also want to talk about a bit. At this dinner party scene, Frances is there with Rachel, and they are at a table with a bunch of adults, and it's definitely the most iconic scene of the movie, I would say, because we get to see Frances attempting to banter with the other adults and making small conversation, and it just goes horribly. They're talking about someone's baby and how beautiful the baby is, and they're showing each other pictures, and Frances is like, I mean, kids, that's you. It's a mini you. How could you not want kids? And then she grabs bread aggressively and just like scarfs it down, and she's like, I forgot to eat today. Someone might bring something up, and she goes into a really long-winded anecdote that nobody can relate to and no one understands. She's just painting herself as childish and very different than the rest of these adults. Like, she has a lot of maturing to do. After the dinner at one point, she's talking with some of the other adults, and she goes into some long-winded monologue about how she wants to find someone that she can lock eyes with across the room, and they both know what each other are thinking. Basically, she wants to have this relationship with somebody where they understand each other on a deeper and spiritual level without saying anything to each other. That's paraphrasing what she said. And I think this is really important to bring up as well, because Baumbach and Gerwig wanted Frances to have a belief. They tell the audience this belief later in the film because that's not what the film is about per se, but it's what this character is about. This is what Frances is seeking. Baumbach and Gerwig also mentioned that they wanted Frances to have this belief, and they wanted that belief to come true in some way. And I'll talk a little bit about how it does later. Basically, at this party, Frances learns that Sophie moved to Japan without telling Frances anything, and this sparks Frances taking a spur of the moment, spontaneous trip to Paris when she has no money at all. The Paris sequence is a really great example of Frances's rock bottom. She goes to Paris for a weekend and sleeps the entire trip away because of the time change. She doesn't get to do anything. She's just kind of sitting around at cafes, not talking to anyone. And the only thing that she does end up doing is going to see Puss in Boots, once again emphasizing her childishness. At this point, Frances is just out of money and she moves back home to Sacramento. In this sequence, it's really interesting because she moves to Sacramento to stay with her parents for a little while. And Frances's parents in the movie are actually Greta Gerwig's real parents. When Gerwig talks about the Sacramento sequence in this film, she mentions that she didn't want this sequence to be humiliating for Frances, that she had to move back home across the country. She rather wanted this to be a restorative moment for Frances to sort of scope out what she wants to be doing. Gerwig describes this sequence as, quote unquote, the rise and fall of going home for the holidays. Gerwig even revealed that this sequence was originally about 40 pages long, which is interesting because this ended up to be more of just a montage in the final version of the film. This sequence in the film is so reminiscent of Lady Bird. This is basically just Lady Bird in a few minutes. There are shots of Sacramento, of the beautiful streets and the city. So this scene, really, to me, it's just Greta Gerwig wanting to write Lady Bird so bad. I think it's really cool to see the early beginnings of Gerwig's future project in this scene. And after returning home from Sacramento, Frances actually works for her college. She is a summer resident assistant. So she goes back to her college and she spends a lot of time in nature because she mentions that nature is the only place where she can't spend money. And things become clear to Frances in nature. This is a classic American literature trope where nature reveals truth to characters. Nature is, untampered by humans. So I think it was really poetic that Frances is shown in nature a lot during this sequence because this is the point where Frances learns a lot about what she needs to be doing. I also really like this sequence because Frances goes back to her old university. So it's almost like she has to move back in her life to be able to move forward. At this point in this film, Frances is also reunited with Sophie. Basically, her and her boyfriend are just fighting for the whole time, and they're both really drunk, and Frances has to be the one to take care of Sophie. So Frances, someone who once was childish and not mature at all, becomes a caregiver in this moment, much like she has to be for the residents of the college that she's looking over. Frances is seen being put in these situations where she has to be the adult. And she has to be the adult to the character who made the decision, hoping that they would appear to be the adult. I think that Frances and Sophie's reunion is really great because this is almost operates like a romance movie. So these two characters were being brought back together and they were estranged for a majority of the movie, but circumstances brought them back together and they really ended up on the same page again in the end, even though they spent so much time apart. I think that this film operates as a great romance film, but it's applied to a friendship, which I think is really interesting. And that's why I used this film to write my paper on friendship in film. In this course that I took, a lot of the movies that we looked at are films where friendships are shown as more important than romance. I think that this is a great film to use because really the whole film is about Frances seeking this connection with her friend again and striving to recreate that friendship with other people and doing it unsuccessfully. When I wrote this paper on Frances Ha, I was taking it from the angle of looking at the communication in this film as failure. So basically, I was analyzing a lot of Frances's interactions with other people throughout the movie. For example, the dinner party scene was a really big one. I looked at how Frances was speaking to the other adults and how those adults received what she was trying to communicate and communicated back to her that she was not being understood. A lot of Frances's communication was failing because she was acting like a child when she is expected to be an adult. I actually named and centered my paper around one line that a minor character has in the film where she notes how something looks off about Frances. The character says that Frances looks older but not grown up. noting how her age and appearance don't quite match her communication and actions. This paper I had a lot of fun with. Like I said, this was the first time that I worked with Gerwig in an academic setting. I had a wonderful professor who was very encouraging, and my next semester with him, I delved more into critical film theory with a longer paper on Barbarian. That was also one of my favorite papers that I've written besides my main Gerwig paper. Towards the end of this film, we get to see Frances finally directing her dance sequence that she's been working on. Gerwig talks a lot about this dance sequence and why it is such an important moment in the film. Gerwig said that this is what the character of Frances made, and she didn't just want to allude to what this character made, she wanted to actually show it. And I really appreciate that because I think it's just another way to show this character. And it's the opposite of lazy writing. This is very proactive. They could have very easily not had to choreograph this segment that Frances made, but they wanted to show this character more. They wanted to show something that she created. And I think it's really interesting to create a character that also creates things. In the film, Frances says that she likes things that look like mistakes, which is why I think that this dance scene is perfect. Gerwig mentions that the dance that was used in Frances Ha uses release technique. This is a method of dancing that uses the momentum of a fall to get yourself back up. I think that this is a beautiful parallel because this is exactly what happens to the character of Frances. Frances has to fall. She has to fail many times in order to get herself back up and to learn how to move forward. She has to fail as an adult in order to learn how to be one. Gerwig, in one of her interviews for this film, asks the question, when is a fall okay? When is a fall planned? And when does a fall hurt? I think that this all has to do with Frances Ha because Frances falls down so many times. Many times are through her own choices, other times she is just a victim of it. But all of this is used to communicate a coming of age story and a character who loses something but learns something in the end. In the dance sequence scene, all of Frances's friends, Sophie, Rachel, her boss at the dance company, are watching on proudly as she choreographs her own dance. I think this was a really beautiful scene because it's one of the only moments in the film where people are really proud of Frances and they really notice the growth that she's made. They're all watching from the audience, proud as this dance is performed, and I think that's really beautiful. After the dance, Frances is talking to these people that came, and she sees Sophie. They look at each other across the room, and they just kind of smile. And the dance instructor is like, "What is this? Who are you smiling at?" And she's looking on, and she says, "Oh, that's just my best friend." And this is referencing Frances's belief from the dinner party, how she really wants someone that she can just look at and connect with spiritually and really understand how they're feeling. So in this moment, Gerwig and Baumbach wanted Frances's wish to come true. They wanted Frances to be able to find someone from across the room that she can connect with and that knows her and she knows them. I think that this is beautiful. I love that they made Frances's wish come true because so many things go wrong for Frances in this movie. It is only fitting that something turns out right and that she learns from things and moves on. And this leads to the end of the movie. Basically, Frances is seen taking all of the help that she was originally offered. She finally gets her own dependence by having her own house. She's working her office job at the dance company while also choreographing her own dances, which is exactly what she wanted to do. And she reconnects with Benji. And, her and Benji it's suggested that they connect romantically. And Benji at this point is also shown kind of shaping up and maturing as well. But and I'll bring this up with every other Gerwig movie that I have on here. I love that the film does not end with Frances's romance with Benji. I love that the film does not end with her reconnecting with someone. The film ends with her story. It ends with her moving into her own place, finally finding a home after all of the different places she lived in. It's very fulfilling to her character, and it's very satisfying as audience members. Her film is not ended by finding romance with another man. It is ended with her own story and her actions and where it led her. I think that Frances Ha is brilliant, it's well-rounded, it's profound, unique, and relatable, and there's something here for everyone. And I haven't addressed yet, but this film is in black and white, even though it was made in 2012. No one exactly knows why this film was made in black and white, but of course, you can have any interpretation you'd like of that choice. A lot of people seem to think that this film is paying homage to the French New Wave of films that had a lot to do with self discovery and moving forward in a time of turmoil. But also, Noah Baumbach was insistent on making this film in black and white because of just how visually beautiful it was. This film is also hilarious. I haven't talked yet about the comedy aspect here, but this is a comedy. This is a really funny film, and every time I watch it, I still end up laughing at the same exact moments. But a lot of the actors that are a part of this film and a lot of Gerwig's friends share that when they first read this script, they actually read it as a tragedy at first. And I think that's really funny because I think that just means that Greta Gerwig and Mickey Sumner really performed well here because they interpreted the lines and dialogue of this film in a completely different way than a lot of other people would have read it. Their performances just brought this script to an entirely new level, and I don't think that anyone else could have acted in these roles and done the same as them. The last thing I really love about this film is that it just feels like a spiritual successor to Lady Bird, even though it came before. So, Lady Bird takes place in Sacramento and is the story of a girl who is dreaming about moving to New York and studying at a New York university. And then this film is about a girl in her late 20s who recently graduated from a New York university and who eventually has to go home to Sacramento to her parents in order to regroup her life. So I don't know. Sometimes I know none of these films have to do with Gerwig's personal life, but sometimes I sort of imagine these stories as connected, characters. Like Frances is almost the older version of Lady Bird. Okay, after that extremely long-winded review, I will get to the rating. I am going to give Frances Ha the Nick pick. Frances Ha is a hilarious, emotional, profound, and unique coming of age masterpiece that does excellent work communicating a character who is out of place from social norms in her journey towards adulthood and independence. This film is quintessential Gerwig, and there's something here for everyone to experience and to feel. I am so grateful for this film and the performances here. Like I said, I don't think anyone else could have done this except for Baumbach and Gerwig, and the other performers here, like Adam Driver, Mickey Sumner, and Grace Gummer. I think that they all brought something here that no one else could have brought. I will never get tired of this film. I don't think I'll ever stop learning from this film. It is funny, it is unique, it's emotional, and yeah, it's amazing. If you are in college or older, I think that this movie is for you, and I think that you can learn something from this. I think that this film says something about accepting the path that is being offered to you and, not necessarily waiting on the path that you want. I think the film is about being proud of your place in life, but not too proud that you're willing to neglect help being offered to you. I think that this is a beautiful message and this is a beautiful story. I invite all of you to please experience this for yourself and make your own experience of it. All right, that was the first entry into the Greta-thon out of the 7 movies that we're going to be going over. I hope that you all enjoyed learning about Frances Ha. I think that this is a great introduction to Gerwig, which is why I wanted to start with it. And our next episode, we're going to be talking about Hannah Takes the Stairs, which is one of Gerwig's first major starring roles, as well as one of her first writing credits. Okay, enough of that. As you all know, the next segment is Dear Coffee Nick, and in this segment, I read some letters from fellow coffee and movie enjoyers about their own coffee and movie opinions, reviews, thoughts, hot takes, or whatever. Now, I will not be having Dear Coffee Nick as frequently during the Greta-thon, but if you would like to send something in, I will definitely talk about it here. It can be Greta related, but as you know, I love to go off topic, so send in anything you want to talk about, movies or coffee or neither of those things. If you'd like to send in a letter, please feel free to write Dear Coffee Nick through DM on social media or email coffeenicksmoviepics@gmail.com. All comments, questions, queries, opinions are welcome, but filtered. All right, everyone. Thank you all so much for tuning into this episode of the Greta-thon on Coffee Nick's Movie Picks. Please be sure to rate the show on Apple Podcasts, follow the show's social media accounts, and share the show with your friends. Tune in for the next episode on Hannah Takes the Stairs. That will be a shorter episode with a movie only. And tune in next week for a full-length coffee and movie review episode on Lady Bird. Until next time, I forgot to eat today. Thanks again for listening to the Greta-thon on Coffee Nick's Movie Picks. Our opening theme is The Light Within, and our closing theme is When the Ash Settles, both themes by the Westerlies. Before you go, please be sure to follow the show on social media at Coffee Nick's Movie Picks, and give the show the Nick Pick by rating it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Thanks so much!